Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. Next up on our team preview series, we're going to be looking at the Memphis Tigers out of the American Athletic Conference. And joining us on the show today to preview a little bit more about the Memphis Tigers himself is Jonah Dillon. Jonah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, before we get started into the position group previews of the Tigers for 2025, Jonah, please tell our viewers where they can find your content.
Yeah, commercialappeal.com. Follow me on X, also at the Jonah Dillon. Yeah, got a lot of Memphis Tiger stuff and Grizzlies and kind of everything else going on in Memphis. So yeah.
Well, the Memphis Tigers are going to be a relatively new look team this season as they lose a lot of their production from a season ago, and namely Seth Hennigan. That was an incredible era that Memphis had with Hennigan at quarterback there for 4 years from Denton, Texas, and I actually currently live in Denton, Texas. So we'll get started with the quarterback position there. They bring in Brendan Lewis, formerly at Nevada, previously at Colorado. So, what does the quarterback room look like? I know they also have a freshman that they're excited about for the future.
Yeah, I mean, so Brandon Lewis is kind of like you mentioned, obviously the experience that he has makes him the favorite to be Memphis's quarterback in the fall, just because he started so many games, 30 plus games as a starter. You look at everybody else in that room, and I think there's one snap in college between the rest of everybody who's in that quarterback room right now. And so obviously he's got that experience. Everybody else, there's a lot of talent in that room. They're very excited. Like you said, AJ Hill, four-star freshman coming in, really big deal that he committed kind of last summer and then decided to stay. And then Arrington Maiden, who's a redshirt freshman, also somebody that they're very excited about. So they feel confident what they have in that room. But Brandon Lewis just, and we've heard it from a bunch of different coaches kind of throughout the offseason, the experience that he has, it means that he had a leg up when he came into this competition. And I think he did well enough during the spring. Now he hasn't been named the starter, and this is still something that obviously is going to be a storyline going into fall camp. But right now, it seems like he's going to be the guy that replaces Seth Hennigan. And like you said, that's a huge deal because Seth Hennigan started at Memphis for 4 years. It's kind of crazy for Memphis fans that there's even a quarterback competition or that we're talking about who's going to play quarterback for the Memphis Tigers because it's been so long since they needed to do that. And so, yeah, that's been the big thing. And it's been interesting to follow throughout the spring.
So, and you feel like Brendan is most likely going to be the starting quarterback. Like you said, they haven't officially named a starter yet.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of heard it in what coaches have said. They haven't, obviously, we haven't heard here's who the starter is going to be. They haven't named a starter, and I wouldn't expect that to come until closer to the start of the season. Offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey said before spring practices that he thought Brandon Lewis had to step up on everybody else just because of the experience. And what we've seen, especially in the spring game, we saw an offense that looks like it's being built towards Brandon Lewis's skill set. He's a really a true dual threat quarterback. Seth Hennigan wasn't that type of player. AJ Hill, who's that freshman, is not that kind of player. And so if you're building an offense around a dual threat quarterback with a lot of option stuff, RPOs, getting the quarterback on the run, that just kind of tells you Brandon Lewis is the guy that they're building this offense for because Tim Cramsey is somebody who builds offenses specifically for his quarterbacks. And so that makes me think, yeah, Brandon Lewis is definitely the favorite. I think it's fair to say that at this point, and that would be my expectation. Again, like you never know what's going to happen in the fall, obviously injuries or somebody plays really well because they have been clear. Everybody has an opportunity to win the starting job, and since no one has won it yet, that continues into the start of fall camp.
So if they are going to be implementing more of an RPO based offense, a little bit more quarterback run game, it's going to start up front with the offensive line that can help pave the way for that type of offense. And there's some moving pieces with the offensive line, some new faces here. I know they recently lost Xavier Hill to Colorado, and Colorado is pretty excited about what Xavier Hill can bring in. Hill played multiple positions, so with the offensive line this year, is this a question, or do you think that they have a confident starting five or like 8 to 9 guys that they feel good about?
I think they're confident. I mean, I think there's still questions about exactly what that looks like because, like you said, Xavier Hill obviously was going to be a starter before the spring and kind of slotted in as basically Memphis's best player. He's a first team All AAC guy who his biggest thing was his versatility. He could play multiple positions on the offensive line. At the same time, for him personally, he wanted to play on the interior because that's kind of his ticket to playing at the next level. And ended up playing tackle a lot last season. So kind of his versatility in terms of his own personal growth maybe working against him in that sense. But like you said, Colorado's excited about him. I mean, he went in the portal. He was immediately ranked as one of the top five players in the portal, and then quickly went to Colorado, where I would expect him to be a starter on the interior of the offensive line. So I think that there's guys that were ready behind him. I don't think it's like a, let's hit the panic button situation. Chris Adams comes back as a left tackle who played really well last year. That was a bright spot. And then you've got a couple guys that they're excited about who they brought in. They brought in a lot of guys in the winter because they knew they'd have to reload here. And they've talked kind of throughout the spring about they got big bodies in there. Travis Burke is a kind of huge tackle who could play on the right side if Chris Adams is going to play on the left. He came from FIU. And then there's some guys on the interior. There's going to be a competition. Kerry Walker, who actually came from Colorado, is a guy in that mix. Malachi Breland is somebody who's played the past couple of seasons for Memphis. They've been really excited about him since he was a true freshman. He was injured during the spring, but is someone who I would expect to be a starter going into the start of the season. And so I think they're confident with the ability they have to kind of fix that problem on the offensive line, but that's still a place where there's going to be competition going into the start of the season.
And do they like their depth up front as well? Do they feel confident with several guys to where they're not like one injury away from questions?
Yeah, and that's something that they've dealt with a couple years ago, really. Like depth in the offensive line was a problem of like, okay, we're confident in these five guys, but then if somebody goes down, what are we going to do? And like, chances are you're going to have injuries on the offensive line. You're not going to keep all five guys healthy the entire season. I think they were better at it last year, but even then you end up kind of towards the end of the season being like, maybe we have six guys. And obviously part of it was the fact that Xavier Hill could basically play any position. So when you lose that, that kind of hurts your depth because if somebody gets injured, you can't just, switch around and put him into whatever that position was. But I think they're confident. Like I said, they brought in a lot of guys with starter like potential and guys who had started other places who are not going to be starters on this team right away, which means they're going to have to be ready to go off the bench, but they're going to be ready if there's injuries. And so I don't think it's a situation where if somebody goes down, they're going to be in trouble. I mean, I think Chris Adams at left tackle, if he were to get injured, that would be a big problem. Obviously, left tackles in a lot of situations the most important position, and he did so well last year. So that would be a big one. But especially on the interior, I think there's a lot of things to like in terms of the depth they have kind of throughout that area.
Yeah, and you mentioning Chris Adams there. Honestly, like if most teams lose their starting left tackle, it's going to be an issue. There's not one team that can say,
Right.
"Oh yeah, we're fine. We got another guy that's just as good." Not in the portal era of college football can hardly anyone say that. So, looking at the receiver room, this was a great unit last year, and they lose I think their top three guys in terms of production. They bring in some transfers. Are there any alphas in the room this year like they had last year?
Yeah, I mean that's the question, right? Like you lost your top three guys. You lost Rock Taylor, who's going to the NFL and was one of the best receivers in the conference last year and was the guy that basically every game was getting double teamed and the whole defense was kind of planning around how do we stop this guy. And now you end up in a situation where you have all these spots up for grabs, which has made it really interesting during the spring and will continue to be throughout the summer. Some guys were hurt. Jaden Thompson comes from Louisville. He was hurt during the spring. I think someone they're excited about. Yeah, who's going to be the top receiver is still a good question. Brady Cluse was somebody who played last year as a true freshman, kind of came out of nowhere and looked really good, had a couple highlight reel plays. And they've talked about his growth and how they think he legitimately could be their number one receiver, which would be, I mean, going back to last year, he was not somebody who was on a lot of radars coming into the spring. And now we're talking about him as a number one receiver, which is a big deal. CJ Smith, transfer from Purdue, was kind of the star of the spring game. And he's a guy with it's just speed on the outside, which they lost with Demir Blankowski was another one of their starters from last year. And so it seems like he's going to play that role of either a speed guy or somebody who can stretch the field. Kind of the thing that we've heard from the coaches about the offense is just speed. That's what they're excited about. And so I think that goes to the receiver room with some of those guys. But that's a position where like I think there's guys who can kind of come out of nowhere and play significant roles because we really don't know what the pecking order is going to be. We have guesses of Brady Cluse could be the number one receiver, but there's a lot of guys who have the potential if they pop during the fall and they get a chance once the season starts to end up being the top receiver for this team. I think it's really hard to call it right now.
Do you think this wide receiver room is faster though overall than what it was a season ago?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like those guys were really good last year, right? That besides Demir Blankowski, speed was not like the top thing for a lot of the guys in that room. And I think they're going to use that. Like I said, I think the offense is going to look different this year. I think speed is going to be the top thing. That's the one word we've heard kind of throughout the spring from Tim Cramsey, the offensive coordinator, and from kind of coaches in general, is there's going to be a lot of speed. And wide receiver, I think, is the place where you're going to see that the most.
How does the running back room look in your opinion?
Yeah, the running back room is to me the strongest position group, at least on the offense, probably on the whole team, at least in terms of returning production. So you've got Sutton Smith, who people were really, really excited about going to last season and suffered a knee injury in the first quarter of the first game and missed the entire season. So basically didn't play at all. He's somebody, if you're just watching highlight reels, you look at him and say this guy's the best player on the team. He can do things that nobody else can do. He was out last year, obviously, for the whole season. Greg DeWosier came in as a transfer from UMass. He also got injured during the season, came back the past couple weeks, and kind of started doing some of those things. He's the shifty out of the backfield. He can catch passes type of guy. Immediately highlight reel plays. Had a crazy play against Tulane with a juke. That was probably the top highlight reel play of the season. And if you go back to the season before, Sutton Smith had the top highlight reel play of the season in the Liberty Bowl when he scored a touchdown against Iowa State. So you're looking at two guys who are extremely dynamic if they can stay healthy, and guys who are not just going to line out in the backfield. Like we're going to see them in the slot. We're going to see them playing together. And I think if they can stay healthy, this is a 1-2 punch. It's not a 1-2 punch of like thunder and lightning. It's two guys who do similar things, but are both really, really capable of big time plays pretty much at any moment. We saw that with both of them. And then I think they're happy with the depth. Makari Bodiford played a little bit last year as a true freshman. He's more of a run between the tackles type of guy. And they lost Brandon Thomas, who was their goal line guy last year. So I think he could come in and be that goal line type player. If all three of those guys stay healthy, I think that's the strongest running back room in the conference. It's one of the strongest running back rooms really in the group of five and in the country. If they all stay healthy, I think it's going to be the kind of engine of the whole team.
I noticed Memphis brought in a few transfers in the tight end room. Are they looking to implement maybe a little bit more of the tight ends this year?
Yeah, it's a huge loss because Anthony Lanford was a first team All AAC guy last year and he's gone. So they needed people who can do multiple things. Christian Ross, who's been here, he played well. During the spring, he was good in the spring game and scored a touchdown. And then Jerry Cross, who came in from Penn State, he didn't really play at Penn State a lot, but comes in and is somebody he's a really big body guy. He got injured in the spring game, but he looked good during spring before that. Um, and again, it's one of those positions where like they lost the guys who played last year. And so people come in and we have an idea of, okay, this guy's pedigree is this, or he did this at a different school. But the reality is there's spots up for grabs. They've used multiple tight ends in the past couple of years. I would expect that to continue. And I think that there's an opportunity for someone to be really involved in the pass game, and we'll see how that kind of shakes out.
So similar to the offense, there's going to be a lot of new players on the defense this year. It are my notes. So I have in my notes here like two returning starters. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, and it's sort of like 1.5 because Cortland Marsh, we kind of count as a returning starter. He missed almost all of the season and then came back the last couple games and ended up redshirting. And then William Whitlow's the other one. So yeah, basically you're looking at one. If you go from the first game of the season, Whitlow would be the only one.
Yeah, and Whitlow had a really good season a year ago. But yeah, ton of transfers coming in for the Memphis defense all over the rosters, like not just the starting group, but also like the two deep, the three deep. I mean, there's countless transfers here. So we'll start up front. Yeah, Whitlow returns at his defensive end spot. What does the defensive line room? What's the floor? What's the ceiling for this group? Are there pretty high expectations with Whitlow's return?
Yeah, I think he raised the ceiling. He was an interesting one because he went in the portal and then got a bunch of offers from, Penn State, Oklahoma, places like that, and they decided to come back. And so it kind of shows you if you're a fan, like this is the pedigree this guy had because those schools were after him. And not surprising, he was a first team all conference guy also last year. I think with the defensive line, the way this defense has played, it's kind of been about if you're the guys up front are clearing the way for the linebackers. Like the linebackers are the engine and the everything of this defense. It's built around them. And so a lot of what they've done is like, let's just get some big bodies who can clear space, and the linebackers are going to come make plays. If they had somebody up front who could consistently get to the quarterback and rush the passer, that would pretty much unlock everything for this defense. I think that would be a really, really big kind of just difference maker for everything they've done. And so that's going to be one thing. But at the same time, a lot of what they've done is, they're playing a 3-3-5 basically. And so it's a lot of bigger guys that are trying to stop the run and then, like I said, clear space. And so Whitlow's kind of the best of both worlds in that case. There's going to be a lot of rotation. That's how they played last year, and I would expect that this year. So it's not like, besides him, I wouldn't expect anyone to be playing a lot of snaps. There's going to be guys coming in and out, and they've been pretty consistent of we need a lot of bodies in that room because we're going to keep shuffling guys in and out. And so even if somebody's a starter on the depth chart or whatever, like people who are on the two deep are going to play pretty much every game. And so I think there's again like a lot of guys come in, there's a lot of opportunities. I don't think this one is one where, okay, they're going to find one guy and he's just going to be the starter. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of guys kind of shuffling through, and there's a lot of people who have been in the program. Moncole, Reggie Grimes, both last year didn't play a lot. I think there's a lot of guys who they are excited about. They want to develop guys, and we'll see how that shakes out.
Are they excited about their recent enrollee in freshman JaQuinton Madison?
Yeah, somebody who was a big time recruit. Obviously, it was a big deal when he came here, and true freshmen have not played a lot at Memphis. That's kind of been a thing we've talked about on both sides of the ball. You can kind of mention every single person who's done it. Obviously, Seth Hennigan is the one that people would know, but Sutton Smith, who we talked about, play as a true freshman. It's really hard to get on the field, especially in the transfer portal era, right? Like guys are coming in with that experience, or they've been in the program for a couple years. Um, I think they're excited about him. Would I expect him to play a lot as a true freshman? Probably not. But we'll see how that room ultimately shakes out.
So you mentioned that in a 3-3-5 formation defensively here from Memphis, that the defensive linemen, they more so like plug the holes. The linebackers come in, make a lot of tackles, and to me, the linebackers from Memphis seem like one of the more intriguing position group battles for the upcoming season. I want to get your thoughts here. They get Brumfield from Virginia Tech. He was formerly at Middle Tennessee, did a really good job for the Blue Raiders. What are your thoughts on the linebackers?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at who's come in, like, so they lost all three starters from last year, right? And so they knew this was going to be a replacement. And people know, like, when you talk to these guys who came in as linebackers, like, they know here's what Chandler Martin did last year, and they want to be a part of this kind of defensive scheme because Jordan Hagan's the defensive coordinator. He was a linebacker. He was a linebackers coach before he got promoted to defensive coordinator. And his entire defense is built around linebackers. Like, you can't stress that enough. That's the whole point. And so guys who are coming in, you mentioned Brumfield, right? That's one. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like there's all these guys who are coming in. It's like you just look at their stats from last year, 50 tackles, 60 tackles, 70 tackles. Like there's productivity in this room. Everett Rusa, Drew Watts. They just brought in Cade Law and Cruz Law from North Carolina in the spring to kind of add to the room, which they're already very excited about. Jaden Flaker, who was here last year, could kind of go through the whole list. Like there's Cam Burden. There's enough guys where some of these guys are not going to play, right? Like that's just the reality. And some of these guys are really talented and they're not going to play. And so that makes me confident that whoever the three guys are that are on the field when they kick off are going to be really good. Like I would expect, again, like it's hard for me to say right now who those three starters are going to be, but I just feel like that room, like you said, is so strong and the talent they have is so strong. And the way that this defense has been built, those guys are going to be in positions to succeed. And so, yeah, really intriguing position battle because whoever does end up coming out of that is going to play a really, really big role for this team.
Yeah, it's kind of like an iron sharpens iron position group for Memphis. Do you think the linebackers is the strongest position group on the team, or running back, maybe like those 1A, 1B there?
Yeah, I would say defensively, yeah, the strongest group because, like I said, we're going to look at this position group after the first game of the season and say, like, I can't believe this guy's not starting or he didn't play at all. Like somebody who played really well last year is going to be not playing. And obviously, some people are going to be unhappy, whatever. But the way that it's been approached throughout the spring was like they're bringing all these guys in. They're all really talented and they're all productive, and everybody has an opportunity to succeed. Like I really don't think anybody was expecting or was promised a role, and so everybody knows, like you said, iron sharpens iron. And yeah, I think it's the strongest position group on the defense.
So looking at the secondary, you briefly mentioned a few minutes ago Cortland Marsh. So he ended last year as a major contributor. He didn't start the season as like an established starter, but he's back at one of his safety positions or at his strong safety position, I believe. How does the rest of the secondary look around Marsh?
Yeah, I mean they lost everybody basically. Like that's one of the position groups where like you just look at last year's roster and it's not just the starters. It's like you just look at the two deep and everybody's gone. Um, and and even like development wise, there's some guys who have been in the program, but the amount of bodies that came in really during the winter was like kind of staggering and continues to. You could tell during the spring, if you're going to play three high safeties, which Jordan Hankins has kind of always done throughout his career, then you need three starting caliber safeties, and like you got to really approach it the same way kind of you approach linebacker of like we need a lot of guys in that room. So you got Cortland Marsh, so there's one. But they're going to need more guys to play those positions. And so another position battle that's been kind of going on throughout the spring. Chris Bracey came from UAB, somebody that they're excited about. And then at cornerback, again, like everybody gone. You lost Kobe Minor and Davion Ross, who were the starters last year. Both played pretty well because cornerback had been a problem for the past couple of years for Memphis, and they kind of stabilized it last year. But obviously, you had two guys who were in their last year of eligibility, so now you've got to do it again. And it wasn't like there's guys who were backups who are now going to be starters. It's new guys coming in. Um, Duke Cooper, who came from Florida State, is someone they've been really high on. They've been excited about him, and again, like it's hard to call. Like I think there's a lot of guys in that room who've played well throughout the spring, and who are going to have every opportunity to earn those spots when they get to the fall.
So we discussed that, and you brought up the linebackers, how deep they are. Running back is one of the strongest position groups on the entire team. What position, maybe outside of quarterback, would you say at this point? Maybe not, and it may not be quarterback as the obvious answer here, but what position group do you think has the potential biggest drop off from first to projected second string?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because a lot of these positions we don't even know who those people are going to be. Like I think I just talked about, I think cornerback is one where there's reason to be concerned just because we haven't really seen a lot of these guys play at a high level. Like it's not like linebacker where guys are coming in and they've been productive at other places. It's a lot of guys who came in who maybe were big time recruits but didn't play a lot at their first school or played at a lower level or something like that, which means like we're not really going to know until we see it on the field, right? We can talk to coaches and hear what they say and stuff, and they're excited about certain guys, but we're gonna have to see that when they come out. And like this defense, again, you go back to the last couple of years, the problem with this defense has been the secondary. Like they kind of stabilized it last year, but the secondary is the thing that they've needed to do better. And so to me, like that's the one. And then on the offense is the offensive line, just because you lost Xavier Hill. And again, we need to see it. We need to see if the like strength of your offense is going to be your running game, you need to have a strong offensive line and you need to have a strong offensive line on the interior. Because if you don't, then how are you going to run the ball? So those are the things that I think I would think of kind of right off the top.
So last season, and really this is the case over the last several years, Memphis had the expectation of being one of the best G5 teams, if not the best G5 team, and at the very least being in the thick of things to be that G5 representative in that, especially the expanded playoff for last year. They had a key non-conference victory in Tallahassee. What is the expectation for the Memphis Tigers this year, considering all the new players? And I mean, they're still going to be one of the most athletic and talented teams in the American and overall in the G5. But what is the ceiling expectation for the Tigers this fall?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question because like last year, like you said, last year it was pretty because of all the guys that came back from 2023 to 2024. Like this time last year it was just playoff, playoff, playoff. Like
Yeah.
there was really no other expectation. Now people, the goalposts I guess moved during the season. It became about numbers of wins, but like in the summer we were talking about the playoff and it was realistic. Like there's no reason why this team was not a playoff contender going into last season. Um, it's really hard to gauge this year because on one hand, you lost all those guys from last year, and typically, especially the group of five level, when you lose that many players, they kind of just send you down and they want to see you be, consistently good for a couple years before you get to have that expectation again of being a legit playoff or whatever contender for the best group of five team. Um, but the thing is, this Memphis team, like to me, is the most talented team in the AAC. Like I don't really see the argument against it. Now, Army and Navy were really good last year, and they're bringing back a lot of players. Navy's bringing back their quarterback, and they beat Memphis last year, and so I wouldn't complain if someone says they're picking other teams to be ahead of Memphis in the conference. And I understand that there's continuity things and there's questions about who's going to play quarterback and all that stuff. But like I said, I think this is the most talented team in the conference, and really like you look across the group of five, maybe UNLV and Boise State have more talent on their roster. I'm not sure that there's that many other teams that have more talent on their roster than Memphis does. And certainly resource wise, there's not teams that have more resources and NIL money than Memphis does.
Right.
Um, and so realistically, like this is what the conversation was the past couple of years before the playoff expanded is like this team should be a playoff contender kind of year in, year out. And so even with all those questions, I still think it's in terms of a ceiling, like that is the ceiling, is this team could win the American Conference and be a playoff contender. That's definitely the ceiling for this team.
So you mentioned there on the resources, the NIL front of college football. So can you tell our viewers like what the thing is like with is it FedEx here?
Yeah, so FedEx, I mean, yeah, FedEx is very involved with Memphis, but this was about a year ago. They unveiled this at the time was a pretty groundbreaking deal where they were going to give Memphis $25 million over 5 years for NIL deals. It's not just football, but football does get a pretty significant portion of that. It goes to other sports teams as well. Um, and so that's huge. Like, everybody kind of, especially in the American, like you saw it last year with a lot of coaches kind of unhappy, or not unhappy, but just mentioning it, I would say before games, like Jeff Traylor with UTSA mentioned before the week of that game, like, well, they have 5 times more money than us. And then Memphis went to UTSA and lost. And so the UTSA fans were obviously very excited about that. Uh, but he was right. Like, his numbers were right. Like, I don't know the exact numbers. It's not, in terms of how much is going to football and how much, like, say, UTSA has or these other programs. But, like, make no mistake about it, this team has more money than the other teams in this conference. Now it's not a huge gap to the point where it's like, well, to some teams it is, but there's other teams that are competing financially. Like USF is competing financially,
Yeah.
Tulane is competing financially, UTSA is trying to get there, and obviously they've had a lot of success recently. Um, so it's not like, oh, it's shocking that this team would ever lose a game or something. But yes, this team has the resources. This is a school and a program that thinks that it should be in a power conference. Like, it has realistic reasons to say that it should be, and competes in other sports and does really well. And has been, like, legitimately consistently one of the best football programs in the country over the last decade. Now they haven't won top level stuff very much, outside of 2019, but they've been really consistently successful. And so that's something that obviously drives investment and drives people wanting to come play for your school.
So you're discussing what the ceiling is this year for the Tigers, still being one of those top G5 teams, and they'll have an opportunity to hit that ceiling if they can win some of their bigger home games. Like, honestly, the majority of their most difficult opponents this fall are going to be playing at Memphis. So they host Arkansas, I believe. They host South Florida, Tulane, and Navy in AAC play. This is a really good home schedule.
Yeah, it's the opposite of last year, because last year they played those all the AAC teams that were tough games really at all were on the road, and then their big non-conference game was against Florida State on the road. So it was the opposite of, like, can you do it? And the games they lost were on the road. So now, obviously, like I said, they didn't play anybody who was good at home. Like, let's just call it what it was. Those teams that, and it was kind of tough for fans because they showed up to the games and were
Yeah.
watching pretty bad football consistently. When teams were coming to Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium, there were some games that were too close for comfort. North Texas, I guess, would be the outlier. They were solid, and that game was competitive. Um, and they're obviously fun to watch with their offense. But uh, yeah, this year it's gonna be the opposite. It's interesting because the Tigers are still renovating their stadium, so it's kind of mid-renovation as they go through this. The Arkansas game I would expect to be a pretty good crowd. It should be sold out. Obviously, a lot of Arkansas fans will travel for that game. The Navy game is a big one, Thanksgiving Day, and also, last year they played Navy early in the season. That team you saw clearly was wearing down by the end of the season. Blake Horvath, their
Yeah.
quarterback, was injured at the end of the season, and then once they had some time off and they went and played Army, then they beat them because they had some rest for the way they play. So I think playing Navy at the end of the season on Thanksgiving Day is actually a pretty big advantage for Memphis, because I don't think that game is going to go the way it did last year, where they just kind of got overrun completely. I think Navy's not going to be in the same place as they were when they played last season. But yeah, those games are going to be big. USF, I mean, it's hard to say. Totally bizarre what happened with Byron Brown, their quarterback last year. If Byron Brown is, if they reloaded, and that's a team that has a lot of resources and a talent too, and obviously a good coach, you've seen what their offense can do if they have a capable quarterback. So that could give you an exciting game too. 2 years ago, they came to Memphis and played 59-50, which was a wild game. So maybe
Remember
we'll see
that
something
game.
like that again.
Yeah, the top half of the American should be really fun to watch this year, and there's a couple of teams like in the middle that avoid some of the teams at the top, so it should be a rather interesting AAC championship race. So we'll see how it goes. But Jonah, really good job previewing the Memphis Tigers today. We appreciate you being on the channel. One last time for our viewers, please tell them where they can find your content.
Yeah, commercialappeal.com, and follow me on X at the Jonah Dillon. Really appreciate you having me.
Yeah.